The Untold Story of Elon Musk, the man changing humanity. Welcome to another edition of The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're unpacking a documentary analysis of one of the absolute most polarizing, fascinating, and consequential figures of our time. We're going to explore the actual mechanics behind the rise of Elon Musk. Now, whether you track his every business move or you just kind of catch the headlines he generates, the story of how he got to where he is today is this incredibly intricate blueprint of calculated risks and just sheer endurance. So we're going to use this explainer to trace that high-stakes journey, breaking down the raw narrative of a man whose stated goal is nothing less than changing humanity itself. Richest entrepreneur or man who changed the future? We really have to start with this massive question because it frames his entire legacy. Is he simply the richest entrepreneur of our generation? Someone who just played the capitalist game better than anyone else in history? Or is he literally the man who changed the future of humanity forever? It's a super heavy question, and hey, we aren't going to answer it right away. Instead, we need to look at the evidence. We need to look at the exact, often perilous path he took to even be in a position where the entire world is debating his place in history. Urgence of a visionary. To really understand those extreme stakes, we have to pull back the curtain on where he started. Because, it's incredibly easy to look at the billionaire we know today, the guy launching rockets and running global tech empires, and just assume it was always a straight line to the top. But the foundation of his visionary drive, that was not built in comfortable boardrooms. It was forged in a much more difficult, isolating environment in Pretoria, South Africa. As a kid, he would reportedly just retreat into reading the entire encyclopedia to satisfy his curiosity. He eventually taught himself how to program, coding his very first video game, this game called Blastar, when he was just 12 years old. Looking at this timeline, that early environment in South Africa was defined by severe bullying and intense loneliness. To survive that, he found his refuge in this deep obsession with science fiction and early computers. Books and code became his launchpad, basically allowing him to construct a mental world far larger than his immediate surroundings. By his young adulthood, he realized he needed a much bigger stage to actually execute his ideas. So he took a massive, calculated risk, leaving for North America with virtually zero safety net. He didn't arrive with a guaranteed empire waiting for him. He arrived with his fiercely held ambition to be right at the center of the internet revolution that was just barely starting to take shape. Zip2 versus PayPal. Those early Silicon Valley days were absolute crucibles for him. When he started his first company, Zip2, he was reportedly sleeping on a beanbag in the office and showering at the local YMCA just because he couldn't afford an apartment. After navigating the sale of that company, he rolled his money into what would eventually become PayPal. But listen, that wasn't a smooth ride either. He was famously ousted as CEO while he was literally on his honeymoon. Talk about a rough trip, right? Yet these harsh learning experiences fundamentally forged his identity. They built up this extreme risk tolerance, teaching him how to put absolutely everything on the line, which is a trait that was about to be tested in ways Silicon Valley had never seen before. The abyss, the brink of ruin. Let's just slow down for a second, because the pacing of his life hits a critical bottleneck right here. When eBay bought PayPal, Musk walked away with roughly $180 million. Now, conventional wisdom says you retire, right? Or you become a comfortable venture capitalist. Instead, he poured almost every single penny of that fortune into two insanely difficult, capital-intensive hardware startups, rockets and electric cars. He was entering the darkest period of his career. It was this highly suspenseful era where the financial stakes were so massive that everything he had built was quite literally one bad day away from total collapse. The story of early SpaceX is basically a masterclass in pushing through failure. Operating out of the super remote Kwajalein Atoll, the engineering team was working 100-hour weeks in just grueling conditions. So, step 1. The first rocket launches, catches fire, and explodes, vaporizing millions of dollars. As the pressure mounts, they try again. Step 2. The second launch ends in disaster. And then, step 3, a third attempt, which was carrying valuable payloads for NASA, fails to reach orbit. The emotional and financial toll on that team was just immense. SpaceX was pushed right to the very edge of bankruptcy, with the entire dream of private space exploration literally disintegrating in the atmosphere. The breakthrough success. Okay, so the crucial point is what happened next. The company was down to its last few dollars. They were out there sweeping the factory floor for spare parts. Make no mistake, if Flight 4 failed, SpaceX was dead the next morning. But against all odds, that final rocket performed flawlessly and made it to orbit. The sheer relief in mission control was indescribable. That single, miraculous breakthrough success saved the entire aerospace venture.
It proved to NASA and really the whole world that a scrappy private company could do what only global superpowers had done before, yanking SpaceX back from the absolute brink.
2008. But surviving the vacuum of space didn't protect him from the harsh realities down here on Earth. In 2008, a simultaneous disaster was unfolding at Tesla. It was the year of the crushing global financial crisis, and capital just dried up overnight. Tesla was bleeding cash, they were struggling with critical manufacturing flaws on their first car, and facing incredibly brutal public criticism. By Christmas Eve of 2008, the company was just days away from missing payroll. I mean, think about that. He was trying to save a rocket company and a car company at the exact same time, pulling together the last few $1 million from personal friends just to keep the lights on.
Transforming the EV industry. Yet, somehow, he navigated this brutal period. And the survival of Tesla in those dark days completely laid the groundwork for an industry-wide transformation. He didn't just save a car company from bankruptcy, he fundamentally shifted how the world views electric vehicles. Before Tesla, EVs were largely seen as, slow, kind of ugly golf carts. By delivering high-performance, highly desirable electric cars like the Roadster and eventually the Model S, he forced a tipping point. The legacy automotive industry, which initially laughed at the startup, was suddenly forced to either pivot entirely toward electric power or face total obsolescence.
Architecting humanity's future. So, having survived the abyss, the scope of his ambition expanded rapidly. We're moving from mere survival to literally architecting humanity's future. These aren't just standalone businesses to him, they represent existential bets on the survival and evolution of our species. He took the immense leverage and capital from the successes of SpaceX and Tesla and began directing them toward ensuring humanity has a backup plan against climate change or potential extinction events. He started looking way beyond traditional commerce, aiming to actually alter the long-term trajectory of human civilization itself.
And this slide brilliantly illustrates how these ventures actually synergize with one another. We've got Neuralink, Starlink, reusable rockets, artificial intelligence, and making humanity a multi-planetary species on Mars. It's like a giant puzzle. Starlink isn't just about high-speed satellite internet. It generates the massive, steady cash flow required to fund SpaceX's ultimate Mars ambitions. While Neuralink pushes the internal frontier, aiming to merge the human brain with AI to keep us competitive with machines, reusable rockets push the external frontier by drastically lowering the cost of space travel. Tying the whole shebang together is the long-term vision of making humanity a multi-planetary species. It's a highly coordinated ecosystem of futuristic projects, all running concurrently.
Extreme work ethic, controversial decisions, personal sacrifices, and relentless ambition. Achieving this unprecedented scale requires a heavily debated leadership style. The documentary analysis distills the man behind the ventures perfectly right here in this quote. Pushing against the boundaries of physics and legacy industries demands a notorious, almost punishing dedication to work, which often results in immense personal sacrifice. Now, this relentless drive inherently breeds a highly polarizing public image and leads to fiercely debated, controversial decisions. But the sheer force required to drag these futuristic industries into the present requires an uncompromising intensity. Is he simply the richest entrepreneur of our generation, or the man who changed the future of humanity forever? Which loops us perfectly right back to our initial hook. After walking through that isolated childhood in Pretoria, the calculated risks with his entire PayPal fortune, the absolute near collapse of 2008, and the sprawling ecosystem he commands today, we have to ask the question again. Is he simply playing the capitalist game better than anyone else, or are we watching the architect of our future? Whatever your answer is, the world we are walking into is one he is undeniably helping to build. The full story is still being written. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.